Welcome to Monk's Moon Temple. Settle in, and let your focus soften. We are beginning a long, quiet exploration into a map not of the world, but of the mind itself, drawn from the profound depths of Buddhist wisdom. We'll speak of what is called the 49-day journey after death. But the real destination is understanding this very moment. This teaching is ultimately about consciousness, and how it navigates the ultimate transition. So let us begin here, now, with a story about seeing. Imagine a renowned cardiologist, Dr. Eris. His entire world was the human heart, its rhythms, its blockages, its repairs. He spent decades in sterile, fluorescent-lit rooms, viewing the vital organ only through screens and scans. One night, after a long series of procedures, he stepped outside the hospital into a rare, clear night. Exhausted, he looked up. And there, hanging in the velvet sky, was the constellation of Orion. He knew it, of course. But for the first time, he didn't just know it intellectually. He felt it. The vast distance, the ancient light, the heart of a celestial giant burning in the void. In that moment, his own lifetime of focusing on the mechanical pump in the chest seemed to fall away. He was struck by a dizzying realization. He had spent his life studying the container, but had forgotten the contents. He had mastered the rhythm of the muscle, but had become deaf to the rhythm of the universe that set it beating. The stars, he understood, were always there. The hospital lights were just too bright. This story is our foundation. The Buddha's teaching suggests we all live under a kind of inner fluorescence, the constant, buzzing light of our thoughts, our worries, our endless wants. This light is so normal to us that it drowns out a deeper, steadier luminescence, our fundamental awareness. The moment of death, in this framework, is when the fluorescent tubes of the body and the familiar mind finally flicker and die. What is left? Only that ancient, star-like light of pure consciousness. For Dr. Eris, the challenge was to remember the stars on his walk back into the bright hospital. For us, the practice is to learn to perceive that inner starlight now, amidst the glare of daily life. This is the core of preparation. Familiarity breeds not contempt, but peace. If this way of seeing, looking beyond the machinery to the mystery, speaks to you, I invite you to subscribe to Monk's Moon Temple. Your subscription nurtures this community of quiet exploration, helping us to create more content that serves as a refuge from the noise. To grasp what happens when the fluorescents go out, we must understand the room they illuminate. This is samsara. Psychologically, samsara is not a place, but a pattern, the compulsive loop of reactivity. A feeling arises, the mind judges it, desire or aversion fires, we act, and that action deepens the groove for next time. It is a tautological story the mind tells itself, on repeat. The engine of this loop is karma, the law of psychological cause and effect. It is not cosmic justice, but natural law. Plant an acorn of anger, and you will someday stand in the shade of an angry tree. Every intention is a seed. Our character is the garden we've cultivated, moment by moment. The rebirth Buddhism points to is happening continuously. The resentful you is reborn in an argument, the patient you is reborn in a traffic jam. Physical rebirth is simply this momentum carrying forward when the current vessel can no longer hold it. The transition point is the Bardo, meaning in between. It is a gap where the old solid ground has vanished and new ground is not yet felt. The revolutionary insight is that life is a series of Bardos. The pause between breaths is a Bardo. The silence after a conversation ends is a bardo. In these tiny spaces, there is a crack in the cycle, a chance to not follow the old habit. We usually fill the space instantly. The 49-day period is the grand, final bardo, where the habit patterns of a lifetime stand exposed, with no body to hide behind. Think of it this way. Your mind is like a complex, self-writing novel. You are both the author and the main character, but you've forgotten you're the author. You're fully immersed in the plot, the drama, the romance, the conflicts. This life is the current chapter. Death is the moment you write, the end. There's a blank page. In that blankness, the clear light, you could remember you are the author, the source of the story. That is liberation. If not, your most ingrained writing habits, your favorite plot twists, your go-to character types, will automatically start scribbling the next chapter. The peaceful and wrathful visions are like all your unused ideas and buried themes rushing onto the page at once. Without awareness, you get sucked into one of those subplots, and it becomes the new story. You are once again the character, lost in the narrative. Spiritual practice is the slow, deliberate process of remembering you hold the pen, even as you're in the middle of a thrilling scene. Let's continue. We've established that our ordinary awareness is like living under a bright, artificial light that blinds us to a subtler, more constant reality. The question now becomes, how do we conduct our lives in this lighted room? This brings us to the most important bardo of all, the one we are in right now, the bardo of this life. In the traditional sequence, this is the first bardo, the foundation for everything that follows. It is not merely the time we are alive. It is our training ground, our workshop, our only chance to prepare for all other transitions. The Buddha was fundamentally practical. His teachings are not about abstract metaphysics for the next life, but about actionable psychology for this one. The quality of our mind in this bardo, its clarity, its stability, its familiarity with its own nature, determines everything. Consider this metaphor. You are a deep-sea diver, and this life is your time on the support ship, in the sunlight and fresh air. You are given a complex diving suit, your body and personality, and you are learning its controls. You are also studying charts of the ocean depths and practicing emergency drills. The eventual dive into the deep, dark ocean is your death and the post-death bardos. Now, if you spend all your time on the ship arguing about the paint color, hoarding snacks, or pretending the ocean doesn't exist, you will be catastrophically unprepared when you have to descend. But if you use this time wisely, to understand the suit's mechanisms, to practice staying calm in confined spaces, to study the maps of potential currents and creatures, then the dive, while still profound and challenging, becomes a journey you are equipped to navigate. The bardo of this life is your time on the ship. The teachings of Buddhism are the drill manual and the ocean charts. So, what is the core training? It begins with mindfulness and awareness, but let's define them in a distinct way. Think of your mind as a vast, clear lake. The weather on the surface, the choppy waves of anxiety, the still calm of peace, the storm of anger, this is your ever-changing experience. Mindfulness is the skill that keeps you on the surface, noticing the weather patterns. Ah, a wave of worry is rising. Now a gust of remembering a task. It's observational. Awareness is the deeper recognition that you are not the weather. You are the lake itself, the capacity that holds all the weather. The waves are temporary phenomena on your surface, they are not your identity. Most of us live completely identified with the weather, thinking, I am anxious, rather than, anxiety is moving through the vast space of my awareness. The practice is to gently, repeatedly, shift identity from the passing wave to the stable, deep lake. This is the single most important preparation. Because in the Bardos after death, you will encounter hurricane-force weather, visions of unimaginable beauty and terror. If you are identified as a wave, you will be obliterated. If you are grounded as the lake, you can witness the storm without being destroyed by it. Let me share an original story to illustrate this cultivation. There was a master clockmaker named Silas, famous for his exquisite, complex timepieces. He worked in a silent workshop, surrounded by the steady, reassuring tick-tock of hundreds of clocks. A young apprentice, Ethan, was plagued by a restless mind. He was always fidgeting, his thoughts jumping from worry about the future to regret about the past. Silas saw his agitation. One day, he placed a single, unfinished clock mechanism in front of Ethan. Your only task today, Silas said, is to listen to this one gear. Do not assemble it. Do not think about the whole clock. Just listen to the sound it makes as it turns. Ethan, frustrated but obedient, sat. At first, he heard nothing but the cacophony of all the other clocks. Then, slowly, he began to isolate the soft, metallic whisper of the single gear. He focused on its rhythm, its tiny imperfections, its steady presence. Hours passed. For the first time, Ethan's mind grew quiet. He wasn't listening to his thoughts, he was listening past them, to a simple, repetitive reality beneath. When Silas returned, Ethan looked up, his eyes clear. I heard it, he said. Silas nodded. Good. Remember this. The mind is a room full of noisy clocks. Your thoughts are just the loudest ones. The space between the ticks, the silent awareness that hears the gear, that is you. Your practice is not to stop the clocks, but to find the listener. In that listening, you will find a peace that no thought can disturb. Ethan's training on the ship was learning to find the listener, not get lost in the noise. This practice extends beyond the cushion. It is about bringing that lake-like awareness into daily life. This is where karma becomes an immediate, practical tool, not a distant theory. Every interaction is a chance to reinforce an old, reactive groove or to carve a new, mindful one. When someone insults you, the old groove of anger rises like a familiar wave. Mindfulness sees the wave. Awareness knows you are the lake. In that split second of knowing, you have a choice. You can follow the wave and shout back, planting a seed for future anger. Or you can let the wave rise and fall without fueling it, and respond from the deeper stillness of the lake, planting a seed for patience. This is karma in action. You are, in that moment, writing the next page of your novel. You are choosing the next gear for your diving suit. Another story. A woman named Lena worked in a high-pressure newsroom, where urgency and cynicism were the currency. One afternoon, a major story broke, and the office erupted into controlled chaos. Lena felt the familiar surge of stress, the tightening in her chest. But she had been practicing. Instead of diving headlong into the frenzy, she took exactly 3 breaths. She felt the breath enter her body, cool and calm. She felt it leave, carrying some of the tension with it. In that tiny bardo between stimulus and response, she remembered the lake. She was not the storm in the newsroom, she was the space aware of the storm. From that centered place, she began to work. Clearly, efficiently, but without being consumed by the collective panic. Her colleagues noticed. Her work was just as good, but she seemed to move through the chaos like a still point. She was, in that day, practicing for the ultimate chaos of the Bardo. She was learning to find the silent gear amidst the deafening tick-tock. She was preparing her mind to not be swept away by visions, but to remain the aware space in which they appeared. This is the heart of the Bardo of this life. The deliberate, moment-to-moment cultivation of a mind that is not easily hijacked by its own content. It is about building a relationship with awareness itself, so that when everything else is stripped away, your job, your relationships, your body, the one thing left standing is not a terrified, reactive ego, but a familiar, spacious, knowing presence. That presence is your true navigator. The rest of this lengthy exploration will delve into the other Bardos. Dreaming, meditation, dying, and beyond, but never forget, they are all extensions of this one. The training never changes. Only the scenery does. Now, let's turn our attention from the waking state to another vital Bardo, one we visit every single night, the Bardo of dreaming. This is our nightly dress rehearsal. In the stillness of sleep, the rigid controls of our waking identity relax. The literal world dissolves, and the mind projects its own interior landscape with astonishing creativity and conviction. Tibetan teachings hold that the dream state is a direct parallel to the afterlife state. Why? Because in both, you experience a reality generated entirely by your mind, yet you believe it to be objectively real. Mastering awareness here is perhaps the most accessible training for what comes later. Think of it with this metaphor. Your mind is a master film director. During the day, you are both the director and a lead actor on a tightly scripted set, the drama of my daily life. The props, your physical environment, are solid, the other actors, people, are independent, and the script, social norms, feels fixed. But at night, you retire to your private screening room. Here, you watch films that you yourself have unconsciously produced, edited, and scored. These are your dreams. You are now just the audience member, but one who has completely forgotten they are in a theater. You believe the horror movie, the romance, the surreal adventure is actually happening to you. The Bardo of dreaming is that theater. The post-death Bardos are like being suddenly thrust onto the world's most immersive, multi-sensory movie screen, with the projectors of your karma running at full blast. If you can't recognize a simple dream as a mental projection now, what hope do you have of recognizing the overwhelming visions later? The practice, then, is to become lucid. Lucid dreaming is the moment you, as the audience member, suddenly remember, I am in a theater. This is a movie made from my own memories, fears, and desires. That simple shift in perspective, from identified participant to aware observer, is revolutionary. It is the exact same cognitive shift needed at the moment of death when the clear light dawns. This radiance is not outside me. It is me. It is the same shift needed when wrathful visions arise. This terror is a projection of my own mind. Let me share an original story. There was a man named Felix, a logical engineer who dismissed dreams as meaningless neural static. He lived in a world of spreadsheets and schematics. He began having a recurring dream. He was in a vast, endless library, but all the books were written in a fluid, shimmering script he couldn't read. He would wander the aisles, feeling a profound and urgent longing, but also a crushing frustration. The dream left him unsettled for days each time. On the advice of a friend, he decided to try a simple intention before sleep: tonight, in the dream, I will look at my hands. That night, the library dream began. As the familiar frustration rose, he suddenly remembered his intention. He looked down. Instead of hands, he saw swirling light, like liquid crystal. In that bizarre, impossible sight, he knew he was dreaming. A wave of exhilaration swept through him. He was still in the library, but it was no longer a prison. It was his creation. He willed himself to fly down the aisles. He opened a book, and this time, he could understand it. It was the schematic for a beautiful, impossible bridge between heart and mind. He woke up weeping with joy, not because of the bridge's design, but because he had tasted the freedom of the dreamer, not the dreamed. For Felix, the library was his own compartmentalized mind. The unreadable books were his unlived emotions and intuitive wisdom. Lucidity didn't change the dream's content, it changed his relationship to it. He was no longer lost in the set, he was aware of the stage. This is the profound psychological insight Buddhism offers. Your relationship to your experience is more important than the experience itself. A nightmare experienced with lucidity becomes a fascinating exploration of your own shadow. A blissful dream experienced with identification becomes a setup for craving and loss. The goal is not to control the dream, but to recognize its nature. This directly trains the mind for the Bardo experience, where control is impossible, but recognition is liberation. How do we cultivate this? It starts with daytime mindfulness. The more you practice noticing the dreamlike quality of waking life, how your perceptions are shaped by mood, memory, and interpretation, the easier it is for that noticing to seep into sleep. A simple practice is the reality check. During the day, periodically ask yourself with full sincerity, am I dreaming? Look at a text, a clock, your hands. Study their solidity. Ask the question. This builds a mental habit. Eventually, this question will arise within a dream. And in the dream, the text will blur, the clock will melt, your hands will be strange. And you'll remember. Another story. A therapist named Naomi worked with trauma survivors. She taught them a technique not for analyzing dreams, but for changing them. When a client was haunted by a recurrent nightmare, she would guide them to re-enter the dream in their imagination while fully awake and safe. Then, she would tell them to change one small thing. A dark corridor could have a soft light at the end. A locked door could be found to be unlocked. You are the author here, she would say. The dream is using the language of your psyche to communicate. By changing the story, you are not lying to yourself. You are communicating back to your deepest self that agency and safety are possible. This is a powerful form of Bardo preparation. It is actively engaging with the mind's projections from a place of safety and creativity, rather than helpless terror. It builds the muscle of conscious interaction with subconscious content, the exact muscle needed when faced with the karmic projections of the Bardo of Dharmata. The Bardo of dreaming teaches us a core Buddhist truth: we are already dreaming. Our waking reality, while consensus-based and physically stable, is still a construct of our senses and interpretations. We are dreaming a shared dream, and we agree on its rules. But it is still impermanent, empty of inherent solidity, and shaped by our karmic predispositions. Recognizing this gently, without nihilism, is the beginning of wisdom. It loosens our desperate grip on the current storyline and opens us to the vastness of the mind that dreams it. Every night, as you fall asleep, you are offered a free ticket to your inner cinema. Watch the show. But sooner or later, remember you're in a seat. That remembrance is a spark of enlightenment. It is the crack in the cycle. And it is practice for the final performance. Let's journey deeper into the mind's landscape. We've explored the waking Bardo and the dream Bardo. Now we enter a more refined, intentional state, the Bardo of meditation, or Samten Bardo. This is not something that happens to us passively like sleep, it is a state cultivated through dedicated practice. It is the conscious, voluntary entry into the gaps we usually rush past. Think of it as the deliberate training for navigating all other bardos with mastery. If the Bardo of dreaming is a dress rehearsal in a simulated theater, the Bardo of meditation is time spent in the quiet control booth, learning the nature of the projectors, the screens, and the light source itself. Here's a new metaphor. Imagine your ordinary mind is like a snow globe that's been violently shaken. The water is murky, and thousands of glittering flakes, your thoughts, memories, and emotions, swirl in a chaotic blizzard. You can't see clearly through the glass. This is our typical state of distracted awareness. Now, meditation is the act of gently setting the snow globe down on a stable surface. You don't try to force the flakes to settle. You simply stop shaking it. You provide unwavering, non-judgmental attention. And what happens? Gradually, naturally, the flakes begin to settle. The water becomes clear. You can see through to the other side with unobstructed clarity. The Bardo of meditation is that state of settled clarity. The flakes haven't disappeared, the potential for thought remains, but they are at rest, and your awareness is no longer identified with their frantic motion. You are the clear water and the space containing it, not the storm. In this settled space, something profound can occur. You might touch what the Buddhist teachings point to as the foundational nature of mind, luminous, empty, and aware. Luminous, meaning it has the capacity to know and illuminate experience. Empty, meaning it has no solid, independent self-essence, it is pure potential. Aware, meaning it is simply conscious. This is a direct glimpse of the clear light that is said to dawn at the moment of death. In meditation, you might experience a moment where the sense of a separate meditator dissolves, and there is just open, peaceful awareness. No problem to solve, no story to tell. Just being. That is a taste of liberation. It is a fleeting preview of the ultimate destination. The more familiar you become with this taste in life, the more likely you are to recognize it when it appears overwhelmingly at death, and not flee from its vast, empty brilliance. Let me share an original story about this cultivation. There was a master violin maker, Elara. She was known for instruments of unparalleled tone. An apprentice, Leo, asked her secret. She didn't speak of wood or varnish. Instead, she took him to her silent workshop, lit a single candle, and placed a block of rare spruce in the center of the table. For the next hour, she said, you will do nothing but look at this wood. Do not think about what it will become. Do not analyze its grain. Just look. See it. Leo, baffled, tried. For the first 20 minutes, his mind was a torrent. This is ridiculous. The grain is tight here. I wonder what piece she'll cut first. My back hurts. The thoughts were the swirling snow. Gradually, bored by his own commentary, his attention began to rest more simply on the object. The color, the texture, the subtle shadows in the candlelight. The mental noise began to settle. After an hour, he wasn't thinking about the wood. He was in a state of simple, intimate seeing with the wood. The boundary between observer and observed softened. Elara finally spoke, her voice quiet. That space you found in the last few minutes, where you were not labeling, not wanting, just perceiving, that is the space from which a true violin is born. Your mind must become that clear, resonant chamber before your hands can shape one from wood. The instrument is not in the wood. It is in that silence. Your work is to become the silence. For Leo, meditation was not about stopping thoughts, it was about discovering the silent, aware chamber behind them. This is the Tibetan Bardo. This practice has direct, psychological self-help benefits. When you cultivate the ability to find this settled space, you create an inner refuge. The storms of life, anxiety, grief, anger, still arise. But now you know they are like weather in the sky. You know how to access the sky itself, the vast space that holds the weather without being damaged by it. You are no longer a helpless victim of your own internal climate. You have a home base in awareness. This is the ultimate emotional resilience. Another story. A former soldier, Marcus, was plagued by PTSD. His mind was a fortress on constant high alert, replaying traumatic loops. Therapy helped, but the hypervigilance lived in his body. A teacher introduced him to a simple meditation. Feeling the sensations in his soles. Not changing them, just feeling. The cold floor, the pressure, the fabric of his socks. At first, it was agony. The simplicity was a torment. His mind screamed for action. But he persisted, for 1 minute, then 5. He was, in essence, learning to set his personal snow globe down. One day, during this practice, a memory flashback surged, a loud noise, a burst of fear. But this time, alongside the panic, he also felt his feet on the ground. The solid, undeniable present sensation of the floor. It was a tiny anchor. He wasn't in the past memory, he was a man feeling his feet, while also experiencing a memory. That subtle differentiation, the space between his awareness and the traumatic content, was his first taste of freedom from it. He was practicing, in the most intense way, the core skill of the Bardo, not to be swallowed by the vision, but to rest as the awareness that witnesses it. For Marcus, this was not spirituality. It was survival. And it is the same skill. The Bardo of meditation teaches us that freedom is not found in changing the content of our mind, but in changing our relationship to that content. It is the disciplined art of non-engagement. You learn to stop feeding the swirling snowflakes with your attention, and instead rest as the open space. This is the training for the pivotal moment after death. When the brilliant, empty clear light appears, the untrained mind, addicted to content and form, panics and looks for something to hold on to, and thus creates the wrathful visions. The trained mind, familiar with emptiness and luminosity, recognizes the light as its oldest friend and merges effortlessly. The difference is built here, in daily practice. It's not about achieving constant bliss. It's about developing a profound familiarity with the nature of your own awareness, so that when everything else is stripped away, you are not meeting a stranger, you are coming home. We now approach the great transition. Having explored the training grounds of waking life, dream, and meditation, we arrive at the Bardo that is the gateway itself, the Bardo of dying, or Chikai Bardo. This is the moment when the support ship of the body finally begins to sink, and we must enter the ocean depths. In the Buddhist framework, this is not an end, but a profound unveiling. The process of bodily dissolution is described in intricate detail in the texts, but its psychological core is universal. It is the sequential shutting down of our attachments to the physical world and our ordinary sense of self. Let's understand this with a new metaphor. Imagine you have lived your entire life in a magnificent, immersive virtual reality simulation. You wear a full-body suit and a headset that provides sight, sound, touch, and a complete identity, your name, your history, your appearance. This VR is the human life experience. You are so engrossed, you have forgotten it's a simulation. The Bardo of dying is the moment the system begins to power down. First, the graphics might glitch, sight dims. Then the ambient sound fades, hearing fails. The haptic feedback in the suit weakens, the sense of touch dissipates. As each sensory input drops away, the simulation, the world you thought was solid reality, begins to pixelate and dissolve. What is left? Just you, the consciousness that was experiencing the simulation, now floating in the pure, dark silence of the server room. And then, in that silent darkness, the true light source, the server's own radiant core, switches on. This is the clear light of reality itself, unobscured by any avatar or game. This is the moment of supreme opportunity. If you recognize this light as your own fundamental source, if you know, I am the player, not the character, you are free. But if you panic, clinging to the fading memory of the simulation, you will misinterpret the light and trigger the next sequence, the chaotic projection of your own saved game files. The physiological process mirrors this. As the body fails, the elements that compose our sensory experience are said to dissolve. The earth element, solidity, the body, dissolves, leading to a sensation of sinking or heaviness. The water element, cohesion, fluids, dissolves, leading to a feeling of dryness. The fire element, warmth, metabolism, dissolves, leading to a chill. The wind element, motion, breath, dissolves, leading to the final outward breath. With each dissolution, a layer of our familiar identity is stripped away. The ultimate instruction for this Bardo is radical acceptance, to not cling to the fading simulation, but to let go into each stage, culminating in a willing surrender into the blinding light that follows. Let me share an original story that captures this psychological essence. An elderly master illusionist, known as the Great Marco, was on his deathbed. His devoted assistant, a young woman named Anya, was grief-stricken. Marco, weak but clear-eyed, whispered to her, "My final trick. Watch closely." He pointed a trembling finger at the wall opposite his bed. "See the mural? The forest scene?" Anya nodded, seeing the painted trees and stream. "It is not paint," he said. "It is light. I have spent a lifetime convincing you it is a forest. Now, I will stop convincing you." He closed his eyes, his breathing becoming shallow. As Anya watched, holding his hand, something extraordinary happened. The mural did not vanish. Instead, it began to unweave. The green of the leaves separated into strands of yellow and blue light. The brown of the tree trunks shimmered into components of red and shadow. The coherent picture dissolved into its constituent colors and beams, which then softened into a gentle, radiant glow that filled the wall, and then the room. In his last moment, Marco opened his eyes, looked at that glow, and smiled a smile of deep recognition. "Ah," he breathed. "The projector." And he was gone. For Marco, the mural was the VR simulation, the convincing illusion of a solid, separate world. His dying process was the deliberate cessation of the illusion-making effort, revealing the pure, luminous source. His final realization was not of a new place, but of the mechanism behind the old one. Anya witnessed not a death, but a dissolution of artifice into truth. This is the ideal passage through the Six Bardo. Not seeing something new, but finally seeing the true nature of what was always there. For most, however, this recognition does not occur. The light is too raw, too empty, too opposed to our lifelong addiction to form and story. We contract in fear. And that contraction is the switch that flips, launching us into the next, often turbulent phase. But even here, the teachings offer guidance. They say that the clear light dawns not once, but twice. First at the absolute moment of death, and then a second time, slightly less intense, shortly after. It is a second chance. This mirrors our own psychological patterns. How often do we miss an opportunity for insight in a crisis, only to have a slightly quieter reflection of it present itself again later, in the aftermath? The practice is to cultivate a mind so familiar with its own luminous nature that it doesn't need a second chance. Another story. A woman named Clara was a skilled deep-sea diver. She described the feeling of descending past the point where sunlight fractures into nothing, into the utter blackness of the abyss. The first time, she said, the panic is biological. Every cell screams for light, for surface. You have to breathe through it. And if you can steady your heart and your mind, something happens. Your eyes adjust. You realize it's not black. It's a profound, velvety blue, and it is full of its own gentle, bioluminescent light, stars in the deep. The darkness wasn't an absence, it was a different kind of presence waiting for your perception to change. The first, terrifying void she encountered was like the initial shock of the clear light, seemingly empty and annihilating. But by not recoiling, by steadying her awareness, she perceived the inherent luminosity within the depth itself. Her training was to stay present through the fear of dissolution. That is the core practice for the Bardo of dying, to not flee the void, but to become so steady within it that you perceive its inherent radiance. We practice this whenever we sit with a painful emotion without reacting, letting it dissolve in the space of our awareness instead of fighting it. Each time is a small death and a small preparation. The Bardo of dying teaches the ultimate Buddhist truth of impermanence in its most personal form. Everything you rely on, your strength, your senses, your very body, will leave you. The only thing that might continue is the quality of your awareness. Will it be clenched in a fist of fear, clinging to a ghost? Or will it be an open hand, releasing into the light? The answer is written in the habits of a lifetime. The moment of death is not where you make your stand. It is where you reap the harvest of how you have stood in every moment before it. It is the final exam for which our entire life is the study period. Let us continue into the heart of the mystery. If the clear light of the death moment is not recognized, consciousness does not vanish. Instead, it enters what is often described as the most vivid and consequential phase, the Bardo of the true nature of reality, or Dharmata Bardo. Here, the mind, stripped of its physical anchor, experiences its own intrinsic energy in raw, unfiltered form. This is not a journey to a place, but a profound internal unfolding. The luminous essence of mind, no longer focused outwardly, now manifests as sound, color, and light. Think of it as the pure energy of your consciousness, previously used to power the simulation of you, now running free with nothing to power but itself. It projects its own inner landscape. I will offer a new metaphor. Imagine your mind is a grand, silent symphony hall. Throughout your life, an orchestra has been playing. This is the constant music of your thoughts, emotions, and sensory experiences. The instruments are your senses and mental faculties. At death, the concert ends. The musicians put down their instruments and leave. The hall falls into a deep, resonant silence. This silence is the aftermath of the clear light. Then, from the silence itself, a new sound emerges. It is not played by instruments, but is the hall's own latent acoustics manifesting as a primordial, vibrational hum, the famous, sacred sound of described in the texts. This hum then differentiates into lights and rays of color, which are the natural expressive energy of the empty space itself. These are not external. They are the hall, expressing its nature as sound and light. For the consciousness present, it is an overwhelming sensory experience. If you can recognize these manifestations as the play of your own mind's nature, if you can understand, this symphony hall is what I am, you merge with them and are liberated. If you cannot, you misinterpret them. The peaceful, radiant lights appear as heavenly realms you feel unworthy to enter. The more intense, vibrant energies, which are actually the fierce, protective clarity of wisdom, appear as wrathful, terrifying deities. You are not being judged. You are meeting your own deepest aspects, seen through a lens of fear and unfamiliarity. The key psychological insight here is about projection. In life, we constantly project our inner states onto the outer world. We say a day is gloomy when we feel sad. We perceive criticism in a neutral comment when we feel insecure. The Bardo of Dermida is this mechanism stripped of any external screen. There is no world out there to project onto anymore. So the mind projects onto its own essence, creating a seemingly objective reality from its subjective karma. The peaceful and wrathful visions are the ultimate Rorschach test. What you see reveals the architecture of your mind. Let me share an original story to illustrate this. A man named Elias was a master glassblower. He could create pieces of stunning beauty, but he was known for his volatile temper. The furnace of his craft mirrored the inner one he struggled to control. In his later years, he sought a teacher, weary of his own anger. The teacher gave him a strange task, to sit before a perfect, clear sphere of glass he had blown and simply gaze into it, not looking at his reflection, but into the depths of the glass itself. For weeks, Elias saw only the room behind him, inverted. Then, one day, as his gaze softened, the image of the room dissolved. The sphere seemed to fill with a swirling, molten light, gold, then crimson, then a profound blue. It was terrifyingly beautiful and felt alive. His first instinct was to recoil, a familiar heat of fear rising in his chest. But he remembered the instruction, do not look at it. Recognize it. In that moment, he didn't see a thing in the glass. He felt a resonance in his own body. The molten gold was his own latent joy. The crimson was his pent-up passion and rage. The blue was a sorrow he had never wept. They were not monsters in the glass. They were the raw, unshaped energies of his own being, reflected back to him without the filter of a story. He began to weep, not in fear, but in recognition. "These are my colors," he whispered. From that day, his temper did not vanish, but his relationship to it changed. He no longer saw it as an external enemy to fight, but as an internal energy to be met and understood. For Elias, the glass sphere was the Bardo of Dharmata. The visions were his own karmic energies. Recognition was the path to making peace with them, not being terrorized by them. This Bardo teaches a radical form of self-acceptance. It suggests that our deepest psychological work is to become familiar with all parts of our psyche, the serene and the fierce, the loving and the angry, so that we do not disown them. A disowned part becomes a projected demon. An acknowledged part becomes a source of wisdom. The wrathful deities are not evil. They represent the powerful, cutting energy needed to destroy ignorance and attachment. But if you have spent a lifetime fearing your own power or anger, you will see that energy as a threat coming to destroy you. Another story. A therapist, Dr. Rivera, worked with a client, Sam, who had recurrent nightmares of being chased by a shadowy beast. Traditional analysis went only so far. Dr. Rivera used an active imagination technique. She asked Sam, in a safe, waking state, to turn around in the dream and ask the beast what it wanted. Reluctantly, Sam tried. In his mind's eye, he faced the looming shadow. "What do you want?" he asked, trembling. The beast's form shifted, and a deep, sad voice replied, "To be seen." As Sam held his gaze, the shadow softened, resolving into the form of a large, weary guardian dog. "I am your strength," it said. "You keep running from me, so I have to chase you to get your attention. You think I am here to hurt you. I am here to protect you, but you never listen." Sam was astounded. The feared monster was a disowned part of his own protective vitality. By turning to face it, he changed its nature. This is the precise instruction for the Bardo of Dharmata. When a terrifying form appears, the teaching is not to flee, but to move toward it, to recognize it as a manifestation of your own wisdom energy. By facing it, you reclaim its power and it ceases to be a threat. The practice for this, now, is clear. Whenever a strong, difficult emotion arises, be it rage, jealousy, or profound grief, instead of condemning it or letting it consume you, try to sit with it. Inquire. Ask, what is the pure energy behind this story? Anger often contains the pure energy of protection. Grief contains the pure energy of love. By learning to differentiate the raw, luminous energy from the tangled story of me and mine, we build the discernment that will be crucial in the Bardo. We learn that nothing appearing in our mind is fundamentally other. It is all the play of our own nature. When that understanding becomes unshakable, even the most dazzling or frightening Bardo vision becomes a door to liberation, not a path to further confusion. We arrive now at the final turning point. If the radiant displays of the Dharmata Bardo are not recognized as self, the mind, still craving solid ground and a sense of identity, moves into the Bardo of becoming, or Sidpa Bardo. This is the final transitional state that culminates in rebirth. The pure energy of consciousness now begins to coalesce back into form, driven by an overwhelming momentum. Here, the abstract becomes concrete once more. The winds of karma become a gale, and the soul, or stream of consciousness, is drawn irresistibly toward its next embodiment. This is the stage of seeking, of longing, of the primal urge to be someone again. Consider this metaphor. You are a drop of water that has been vaporized into mist, the formless expanse of the previous Bardos. Now, the atmospheric conditions of your karma begin to change. The mist feels a pull, a gravitational yearning to condense. It starts to coalesce into a cloud. But what kind of cloud? A dark, heavy storm cloud? A wispy, high cirrus cloud? This is determined by the quality of the mist, its memories of being a drop in an ocean of anger, or a drop in a gentle stream of compassion. The cloud is your interim form in the Bardo of becoming. It is not yet rain, not yet a new body, but it is taking on a specific character and trajectory. Then, it encounters the wind of circumstances. The exact moment and place of potential conception that matches its frequency. The cloud releases its rain, and the drop falls into a specific river, lake, or ocean, a new life. The longing to condense is the pull of habitual tendencies. The form of the cloud is the shaping of a subtle mental body. The final descent is rebirth. The texts describe this Bardo as being dominated by a feeling of being blown by a mighty wind, or of fleeing in terror toward refuge. The consciousness seeks shelter, any shelter, from the unbearable openness and intensity of the preceding states. It will be attracted to environments, lights, sounds, visions of coupling beings, that resonate with its most dominant emotional habits. The critical teaching here is that even in this final stage, awareness is possible. Even as the karmic storm carries you, you can observe the process. You can notice the type of shelter you are drawn to. And with immense training, it is said you can influence the direction. You can choose, consciously, to be drawn toward a situation conducive to spiritual growth, or even to recognize the storm itself as illusory and halt the process entirely. Let me share an original story to illustrate this powerful pull. There was a renowned horticulturist, Alice, who specialized in reviving near-dead plants. She had a gift for feeling what they needed. She once described the process of a seed germinating. "It's not a calm thing," she said. "Inside that hard shell, there's a kind of desperate, blind reaching. The seed doesn't think, 'I want to be an oak.' It's just pure, biological urgency responding to conditions, moisture, warmth, darkness. It cracks itself open for that chance, driven by a force older than thought." She paused, then added a personal reflection. "I felt that once, in a deep depression. It wasn't sadness. It was a crushing, mute pressure and then a blind, screaming need to find any light, any reason to push through. I took a job I didn't want, just to have a structure. That job was the moisture and warmth. It was the condition that let me crack open and send out a weak, green shoot toward life again. I wasn't choosing. I was being driven by the life force in me, and it would have taken any available opening." Alice's experience is a profound analog for the Sitpa Bardo. The depression was the chaotic, painful aftermath of a death of her old self. The blind, screaming need was the karmic momentum seeking a new form. The job was the available realm of rebirth. Her story shows the driven, often subconscious nature of this transition. Our work in life is to purify that momentum so that when the drive comes, it is not a blind scream, but a conscious inclination toward light. This leads to the pivotal Buddhist concept of bodhicitta. The awakened heart-mind that seeks enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. This is the ultimate tool for navigating the Bardo of becoming. Cultivating Bodhicitta is like programming your soul's GPS. If your deepest, most habitual longing is not for personal comfort or security, but for the alleviation of universal suffering, then that becomes your magnetic north. In the storm of the Bardo, that compass will orient you. You may be drawn to a life where you can be of service, to parents who value compassion, or to circumstances that challenge you to grow in wisdom rather than indulge in ignorance. Bodhicitta doesn't necessarily stop the rain from falling, but it ensures you fall into a fertile field, not a barren salt flat. Another story. A former search and rescue pilot, Captain Reed, described the experience of flying through a violent thunderstorm at night, instruments failing. All sense of up and down is gone, he said. The plane is just a leaf. In that chaos, there's one thing you can do: trust your training and set a single intention. For me, it was find the coastline. Not a specific airport, just the general, welcoming line of the shore. I pointed the nose in the direction I believed was east and held it, through the battering, through the terror. I wasn't flying the plane, I was being an intention. He did find the coastline, and followed it to a safe landing. In his story, the thunderstorm is the Bardo of becoming, a chaos of karmic forces. The failing instruments are the loss of ordinary sensory perception. His training was his lifetime of ethical and mindful living, which created a stable core. His single intention, find the coastline, was his cultivated Bodhicitta, a benevolent, clear direction. He held that intention, and it carried him through to safety. Our spiritual practice is that training. Our deepest, most heartfelt aspiration is that intention. We may not control the storm, but we can set the direction of our bow. The Bardo of becoming teaches the final, stark lesson of responsibility. We are, ultimately, being driven toward our next experience by the sum total of our past choices and ingrained tendencies. It feels like fate because the momentum is so strong. But the Buddha's message is that the momentum was created by us, and it can be altered by us, right up to the last second. Every moment of patience instead of anger, of generosity instead of greed, of clear seeing instead of delusion, is like applying a gentle counter-steering against the karmic wind. It may not feel like it changes your course today, but at the moment of ultimate transition, that subtle change in bearing can mean the difference between landing in a realm of suffering and finding a harbor of opportunity. The journey through the Bardos is a mirror held up to the journey of this life. We are always in a state of becoming, always being pulled by our habits toward our next thought, our next emotion, our next action. The 49-day narrative is that process in its ultimate, amplified form. By understanding it, we are empowered to live with more agency now. We start to see our cravings and aversions not as trivial whims, but as the very forces that shape destinies. And in that seeing, we find the power to choose anew. Now, let us draw all these threads together. We have journeyed through the Six Bardos, not as distant, post-mortem states, but as a profound map of our present consciousness. The ultimate purpose of this detailed Buddhist cartography is not to make us experts on death, but to make us masters of life. It is to transform our relationship with this very moment, which is, itself, a tiny bardo, a fleeting gap between what was and what will be. The entire teaching culminates in a single, actionable insight: the way you navigate the small transitions is the way you will navigate the great one. All the metaphors. The stars behind the city lights, the snow globe, the symphony hall, the condensing cloud, point to one reality. We are living in a reality of our own projection, mistaking the projection for the projector. The Bardos are stages where the projection becomes increasingly transparent, forcing a confrontation with the source. The moment of death is the ultimate opportunity for that confrontation, but it is an opportunity built on the foundation of a million smaller ones we encounter daily. Did you recognize the wave of anger as a passing weather pattern in the sky of your mind, or did you become the storm? That was a Bardo. Did you see the craving for distraction as a temporary impulse, or did you blindly follow it? That was a Bardo. Each is a microcosm of the choice presented in the clear light, to identify with the content, or to recognize the context of vast, silent awareness. Therefore, the practice is always now. It is the gentle, relentless work of familiarization. We familiarize ourselves with the nature of mind through meditation, learning the taste of awareness itself. We familiarize ourselves with our emotional energies through mindful curiosity, making the wrathful deities of our psyche into known quantities rather than terrifying strangers. We familiarize ourselves with intention by cultivating bodhicitta, so that our deepest pull is toward wisdom and compassion. We are, in essence, getting to know the true navigator before the ship enters the hurricane. When the storm hits, be it the storm of loss, of crisis, or of physical death, we are not meeting a foreign captain. We are meeting ourselves, and we know what to do: rest as awareness, recognize projections, and hold a benevolent intention. This path demystifies the afterlife by emphasizing the utter practicality of the present. There is no magic, only cause and effect. The serene or turbulent experiences described in the Bardo Thodol are not fantasies, they are the predictable outcomes of specific mental habits. A mind conditioned by generosity and calm will experience the after-death luminosity as a peaceful, welcoming dawn. A mind conditioned by hatred and fear will experience that same raw energy as a terrifying conflagration. The light doesn't change. The perceiver does. And the perceiver is built thought by thought, choice by choice. So, we end not with an ending, but with a beginning. The 49-day journey after death, as described in Buddhism, is the final chapter of a book you are writing today. You hold the pen. Your mindfulness is the clarity of your prose. Your ethical choices are the plot's direction. Your wisdom is the theme. You cannot control the final page until you have written all the pages that come before. Start now. In the next Bardo, the next hour, the next breath, the next reaction, practice recognition. See the stars behind the city lights. Be the lake, not the wave. Listen for the silence in the symphony hall. In doing so, you are not just preparing for death. You are beginning to truly live, liberated from the fear that gives the cycle its power. The journey continues. This concludes our exploration.